In this video, we're doing another Key comic book spotlight, this time on Clint Barton, Hawkeye. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle Haas. And in this video, we're doing another Key comic book spotlight, this time on Clint Barton, Hawkeye. Now, if you're new to my channel or this series, what I typically do with Key comic book spotlight is just take a notable superhero or supervillain and point out 5 Key and or Grail comic books that the comic book collecting community often pursues when they're fans of this character. And in this one, we're doing Hawkeye. But before I get into my picks for today, if you guys could drop me a like or a comment or subscribe if you're enjoying the content, help support the channel, do one of those things, and I would very much appreciate it. With that being said, let us get into the picks for today. And of course, you know, like I do with all my Key comic book spotlight videos, I always got to start with the first appearance. And of course, Hawkeye's first appearance is Tales of Suspense number 57, a great classic blue chip Silver Age book. And this one is really cool because Hawkeye, for those who don't know, made his first appearance alongside the Iron Man character. In fact, actually, when he made his first appearance, I suppose you could kind of qualify him as a villain, so to speak. So he actually confronted Iron Man in this particular issue right here. And this is one of those great books that I feel like has always been kind of undervalued for a very long time. Of course, a lot of these blue chip Silver Age books are always desirable, but first appearance of Hawkeye was one that, you know, for a long time you could kind of find this book for good deals overall. But with the current surge of the comic book industry and with prices doing what they're doing here today, this is definitely a book that is heated up a lot in the recent months. But with that said, I still think that this is one of the more affordable Key comic books with regards to, like, you know, I'd call Hawkeye an A-tier character, especially coming off the MCU. I mean, I think now a lot of people meme on him because, you know, he's probably the weakest Avenger, you know, he's got the bow and arrow, etc. But he is, in my opinion, an A-tier character with regards to the Marvel Universe. And for that reason, I actually think that this particular book is one of the best superhero first appearances that you could get for a Marvel character and is very, very affordable for that reason. I also do love the fact that, you know, you get this awesome cover. I love the fact that Black Widow plays a part of the storyline as well. And as we dig into the numbers here, you'll see there is a fair market value of this book at 9.8, selling for the $105,000 range back in February of 2016. So hard to know what that would go for today. And at the bottom here, Go Collect says that the fair market value for this book is around the 450, 425, 375 range. You know, definitely up and down. But when I go onto eBay looking for raw books, you know, I definitely see this book selling around the $300, $400 range or so. So definitely not a cheap book by any stretch of the imagination, but at the same time, very attainable when you're comparing it to other books like First Iron Man or First Thor, things like that. So Tales of Suspense 57, first appearance of Hawkeye, a great Silver Age book. All right, let's move on now to my next pick. And my next pick is actually going to be Avengers number 19, which came out in 1965. And what is the significance of this? Well, this is actually the first appearance of a character known as the Swordsman. There you see him on the cover. But as it relates to the Hawkeye character, this is actually Hawkeye's origin story. So, you know, a lot of people always talk about if you can't get the first appearance of a character, maybe you can't get a second appearance of the character. Another great book to own is, of course, the origin of a character. And there's a lot of speculation right now that later on this year, when we get the Hawkeye Disney Plus show, we are actually going to see the Swordsman make an appearance. So that already kind of makes this book special. But because this is the origin of Hawkeye, there's actually a lot of connections to the Swordsman character. I believe the Swordsman was actually a mentor of Hawkeye in their storied run, which is why there's speculation that we're going to see the Swordsman in the Hawkeye show later on in the year. So for that reason, Avengers number 19, a very, very cool book. Hawkeye's origin story and the first appearance of the Swordsman, who played a mentor role to the character. So a great Silver Age book to own if you are a fan of Clint Barton. And as we dig into the numbers here, you'll see there is a 9.8 selling back in 2018, fair market value around the $9,000 mark. And then here at the bottom, you know, you won't see too many CGCs of this book, you know, and that sort of 2.0, 1.5 range. But typically speaking, when I go onto eBay, this is a book that has gotten a little bit hot recently. You can maybe find this hovering around that $75, $80, $100 range, depending on the grade and depending on the deal that you could find for yourself if you're hunting online. All right, let's go on now to the next book here. And the next book is a very cool one. This is Hawkeye number 1 from 1983, written by Mark Gruenwald. And what is the significance of this? Well, this is actually the first time you're going to see Hawkeye in title, in name, on a comic book cover. This is, I suppose you could call this his sort of first solo story or first kind of on limited series, if you will. And also, this is also the origin of how Hawkeye and Mockingbird had met. Now, for those who don't know, Hawkeye in the comic books has a relationship with Mockingbird. They kind of have an off and on again relationship in the comic books. Unfortunately, Mockingbird has not made an appearance in the MCU, so this particular relationship isn't one that is hot in the comic book space, unlike Vision and Scarlet Witch, for instance. But this is a great relationship with regards to comic book lore and comic book history, and this happens to be the origin of how they met. Very, very cool story back in the 80s, and very cool that you see Hawkeye there in the title, which of all the Marvel characters, Hawkeye is one that hasn't had too many ongoing series. He's always kind of hovering in that A to B tier as far as his notability within the Marvel superhero space. So Marvel doesn't always give him a series here. So this is actually kind of a rare thing to see Hawkeye in the title. And for that reason, I think that this book is really cool and a very, very great collector item to have if you are a fan of the Hawkeye character. And as we dig into the numbers here, you'll see 9.8 selling fair market value back in April of 2020 around the $170 range. And of course, Go Collect's not going to have all their numbers listed here, but when I go onto eBay and look around for this book in raw copies, you're going to see this book selling around that $25, maybe $30 range, depending on the deal you can find for yourself and depending on the grade. All right, let's go on now to my next book here. And my next book here is actually going to be an honorable mention for me. So we're going to take a pause break from my top 5 picks. I just had to give another shout out to another 80s book here. And that, of course, is going to be West Coast Avengers #1, the #1 issue of the 4-issue limited series. And what is the significance of this? Well, this is the first appearance of the West Coast Avengers, who was a team that was dedicated to the West Coast of the United States, where the Avengers, of course, their base was over in New York. Eventually, in the 80s, they would open up the West Coast Avengers branch, and they would be tasked with protecting the West Coast from threats. And Hawkeye would actually be the founding member of the team and the leader of that team. And so this, for that reason, is a really, really cool book to me. I just gives me nostalgia thinking back to the West Coast Avengers. A title that had always been kind of memed on as being valueless, but with the WandaVision and the recent surge of certain books within that run, this title has gotten kind of hot recently. And I speculate that later on in the year, when we get the Hawkeye show, who knows, they might spawn a West Coast Avengers team within context of that show, and we might start to see this book get kind of hot. But regardless, I still think, as far as a Hawkeye collector, if you're a Hawkeye fan, this is a great book to get your hands on, and one that is very, very affordable to find. I'm sure that if you go into an LCS, you could maybe find this in a dollar bin. Maybe you could find it in a back bin for $5 or so. When you go onto eBay, of course, you're going to pay a little bit of that premium, but this is one that you typically see selling around the $10 or $15 range. So West Coast Avengers #1, not to be confused with the West Coast Avengers #1, ongoing #1. This is the limited series #1, first appearance of the team, and you got that great cover with Hawkeye saying Avengers Assemble. All right, let's go on now to my 4th pick here, and my 4th pick is going to be New Avengers #27, written by Brian Michael Bendis. And what is the significance of this? Well, this is actually the first appearance of Hawkeye as the character known as Ronin. Now, we all saw in Infinity War and Endgame, Hawkeye, after the snap, he kind of went rogue, and we saw him in Japan, and he took up this mantle of the Ronin character. Now, the Ronin character is, this super, super crazy ninja who is kind of like an assassin of sorts, and there's been different Ronins over the years, but one of the most popular Ronins was when Clint Barton actually took up the Ronin character, and in this particular book, this is the first time that Clint Barton actually did take up that mantle. And for that reason, I think that this is a really cool book, especially one that has gotten kind of hot recently due to the fact that in Endgame we saw a version of Hawkeye as the Ronin character. So for that reason, the New Avengers #27 is a very, very cool collector book to have, especially if you're a fan of the movies as they relate to the Clint Barton Hawkeye character within context of the movies. Now, this one's also really interesting because it's hard to say right now what the future of the Hawkeye character is. He kind of reverted a little bit back to sort of his bow and arrow, so to speak, persona later on in the Endgame movie. But it does beg the question of, will we start to see more adventures with Hawkeye being the Ronin character? Will we see, him make another appearance, perhaps in like a film like a Shang-Chi movie, or maybe when Marvel starts to do more properties within the Asian countries, will we start to see what Hawkeye was doing over there as the Ronin character? So this will be very interesting to see where this book goes in the market. But currently speaking, speaking, it is still a great collector item to have, a great book to have. And, typically speaking, when I go onto eBay, I see this book being sold around, the $30, $35 range or so. But as we dig into the Go Collect numbers here, you'll see there is 9.8 being sold, fair market value just recently here in May, around the $85 range. So definitely a cool book, very, very affordable, and a great cover, by the way. Seeing Elektra there, and I suppose that's the hand that is behind her going up against Clint Barton Ronin. All right, let's go on now to my next pick here and the last book that I have, and that's actually going to be Hawkeye #1, written by Matt Fraction in 2012. And what is the significance of this? Well, this is the kind of historic, legendary, very, very celebrated, very, very talked about, popular storyline that was a Hawkeye ongoing series written by Matt Fraction. Now, I personally have never actually read this particular comic book. It's definitely something that I would love to pick up the trade for, but everyone swears by this one. Everyone talks about the Matt Fraction run being one of the best reads that you can get, especially with regards to Hawkeye. So for that reason, this particular issue is the one that kind of kickstarted it off, kind of got things going. And also, later on in the year, we're going to get the Hawkeye show, and we're going to see Kate Bishop in it. And this particular comic book run is the one that I believe that the show is going to pull from the most. Of course, this is where they had Clint Barton and Kate Bishop team up as the two sort of Hawkeyes, so to speak. And for that reason, I think Hawkeye #1 is a very cool book to own, and a very cool cover, very unique with regards to comic books, having kind of this like black and white aesthetics with just like the small traces of purple. So very cool collector item to have. Hawkeye #1, written by Matt Fraction in 2012. And as we dig into the numbers here, you'll see this one is definitely starting to get hot recently. 9.8's going around that $130 range. Here you see sales in May. And when I go into eBay, definitely a book that I see, being sold around that $40, $50, $60 range or so, depending on the deal you can find for yourself and depending on the grade, which typically speaking, this is one that usually sits in higher grade. Anyways, that is all I have for this video. Those are my 5, I guess you could call them maybe 6, with the honorable mention, key comic books for the Hawkeye character. I love the Hawkeye character. He's always a character that, I don't know about you guys, but whenever I played the Marvel video games, I always find myself gravitated to picking Hawkeye if he's ever in a video game. I just like, the bow and arrow aspect to it. I like that, just his whole steez, I suppose you could say. I know he's been a little bit of a meme, with regards to the MCU, people thinking that, he's the weakest Avenger and therefore like, the least relevant. But to me, Hawkeye is a great character, and I think you'd be lucky to have any of these books. Anyways, that is all I have for this video. Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and I will see you in the next one.